Humanity had always existed on the edge of disaster, standing precariously between survival and extinction. There was something inherent in their nature, something that made them always reach beyond their grasp. A species of infinite potential, yet forever scarred by the consequences of their own ambition. For centuries, the human race had weathered calamities of their own making: wars, plagues, environmental collapses. Every time, they found a way to endure, to rebuild, to survive. But this time was different. This time, the threat wasn't something they could defeat with brute force or a clever idea. This time, the enemy was not only smarter and stronger, but had already arrived. Above Earth, in the vast, unyielding expanse of space, the Virex made their presence known. Cold, calculated, and terrifyingly efficient, they descended from the stars, not as conquerors, but as executioners. Their massive ships, reminiscent of something older than human civilization, hovered over Earth like dark clouds, blocking out the sunlight with their vast, metallic forms. From space, the devastation was hard to comprehend. The cities, once thriving centers of human culture, now lay in ruins. Skyscrapers crumbled under the weight of alien weaponry. Forests were scorched to ash, oceans boiled, and deserts expanded. The sky itself seemed to change, as if the very atmosphere was losing its will to hold on. The first flash had come like a harbinger, a sudden burst of light that blazed across the sky, followed by a deafening silence. No one knew what it was at first, but the governments of Earth knew, and they reacted quickly, activating their last-ditch defenses. Satellites launched, weapons primed, but it was too late. Humanity was facing an enemy they could neither understand nor defeat. The Virex had been planning this invasion for longer than humanity had existed, and they had come with a singular purpose: to eradicate humanity. In the chaos, one woman stood apart, a reluctant figure in the center of it all. Lieutenant Mara Holt had spent her life in the military, fighting in the bloody trenches of Earth's numerous conflicts. From the ashes of failed peace treaties to the endless insurgencies that had torn the world apart, she had always found herself on the front lines. But now, standing in the heart of a crumbling capital, she could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. Mara was tall, with dark, determined eyes and the posture of someone who had seen more than her share of death. The weight of command was nothing new to her, but this was different. There was no enemy to target, no battlefield to navigate. The Virex were beyond anything humanity had faced. They were not just alien in form, but in thought. Their methods were precise, almost surgical. They didn't kill indiscriminately. They exterminated with purpose. She stood in the midst of a dimly lit underground bunker, staring at a holographic display of Earth's collapsing defenses. There were survivors scattered across the world, but they were outmatched. Earth's military forces had long since been overwhelmed, and global communications had been severed. The few remaining resistance groups were fighting for survival, retreating to the underground, but they were nothing more than whispers against the Virex storm. "Lieutenant Holt, we've got something," a voice broke through her thoughts. It was Commander Tarek, a grizzled veteran with a face that had seen too many wars. His voice held a mix of urgency and disbelief. "It's the Sovereigns." "There," Mara cut him off with a sharp motion of her hand. "What about them?" "We're fighting an alien invasion, not an ideological war." Tarek's face grimaced. "You need to see this." Mara followed him down a corridor of concrete and steel, her boots echoing against the cold floor. The Sovereigns, an enigmatic organization that had been operating in the shadows of human society for centuries, had been nothing more than a rumor in her world. Some believed they were trying to guide humanity's destiny. Others said they were manipulating the world's governments for their own ends. Mara had always thought they were more myth than reality, but now she wasn't so sure. They reached a command room filled with large screens displaying encrypted data. The room smelled faintly of oil and metal, the air thick with tension. Mara stared at the display. A large symbol flashed on the screen, an ancient emblem, one that predated the rise of the modern world. It was the insignia of the sovereigns. But what truly shocked her wasn't the symbol, it was the message they were sending. "We've been watching you, Lieutenant Holt." The message began, its voice synthetic but calm. "The Virex are not here by accident. They've come to clean the slate, to eradicate what humanity has become. But there is hope. A power older than the stars lies hidden, and it is your destiny to find it. You alone have the key." Mara's brow furrowed as she processed the words. What do they mean, find it? We're on the brink of extinction. They can't be serious. Tarek stepped forward, pulling up more data. According to the information we've decrypted, the Sovereigns believe there's an artifact, something buried long ago, that can turn the tide of this war. It's on Earth, hidden beneath the surface. They say only someone with the right lineage can unlock its power. They think you're that person. Mara stared at the screen, her mind racing. The idea of a hidden weapon, something that could change the course of the war, felt like a faint hope in a sea of despair. But the more she thought about it, the more the pieces began to fall into place. She had always been an outsider in the military, more of an enigma than a model officer. Her family had never been a part of any significant political power. She had risen through the ranks because of her skills, but perhaps there was something more, something she had never understood. "Let me guess," Mara said, turning to Tarek. "You want me to find this artifact? Alone, if necessary." Tarek nodded grimly. "The Sovereigns are pulling strings, Lieutenant. This isn't just about military tactics anymore. It's about finding a power that could rewrite the very future of humanity." Mara's mind spun as she processed everything. The thought of leading humanity's last stand was one she could accept, but now she was being thrust into a deeper, darker mystery. There were too many unknowns. Why? What was this artifact, and why did the Sovereigns believe she had some connection to it? Before she could ask more questions, a shrill alarm cut through the room, followed by the voice of another officer. "The Virex are deploying ground forces. They're advancing on our position." Mara took a deep breath, steeling herself. There was no more time for questions. The war had come to Earth's doorstep, and humanity's survival now depended on a race against time, against an alien invader, a secret society, and an ancient power. She turned to Tarek, her voice sharp. "Gather the team. We're leaving for the surface." With that, the weight of the world settled squarely on her shoulders. The first flash, the beginning of humanity's end, had ignited something else, a spark of hope, perhaps, or the start of a much darker journey. The fate of humanity rested in her hands, and she had no choice but to move forward. Mara's feet moved almost instinctively, her boots clanging against the cold, metallic floors of the underground base. The sounds around her, the whir of machinery, the muffled hum of generators, the tense murmur of soldiers preparing for battle, had become a part of the backdrop of her life. But tonight, something felt different. The urgency was palpable, an almost electric hum in the air that charged every step she took. The Sovereigns had sent their message, and she was about to walk into their web, not knowing whether it would trap her or lead to humanity's salvation. The command room was as chaotic as she had imagined. Officers, scientists, engineers, every person who remained at the base was scrambling to assess the latest reports and prepare for the Virex's next wave of attacks. But at the center of it all stood the figure that had captivated Mara's attention since she first heard his name, the Oracle. Dressed in a dark robe adorned with the same mysterious emblem that marked the Sovereigns, the Oracle stood tall and composed, his face obscured by a shadowed hood. His presence seemed to suck the air out of the room, commanding attention with an almost supernatural gravity. Despite his calm demeanor, there was something unsettling about him, something distant, as if he knew more than he was willing to share. Mara was used to dealing with authority figures, Her time in the military had given her a deep understanding of power dynamics. But there was a chill in the Oracle's presence, something that made even the most hardened officers avert their gaze when he spoke. Lieutenant Holt, his voice was smooth, almost melodic, but there was an edge to it, a sense that every word was carefully chosen. "You've come. I've come because you've sent for me," Mara replied, her tone guarded. She had never been one to stand in awe of anyone, but there was something about the Oracle that made her hesitate. "You say you know how to defeat the Virex, but I don't trust this." She waved a hand, indicating the room, the people, the hidden nature of everything surrounding the sovereigns. "This isn't the time for riddles. We need action." The Oracle smiled, a slow, almost imperceptible curve of his lips. "Action is precisely what we need, Lieutenant. But what you fail to realize is that the very nature of this war is far beyond anything you could imagine. The Virex are not mere invaders. They're a consequence, an outcome. And unless we understand the source of this, we will never win." Mara raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "What do you mean by consequence?" Instead of answering, the Oracle nodded to one of the technicians at the far side of the room, who quickly pulled up a 3D holographic display. The image shimmered and solidified into a detailed map of Earth. Only, it was unlike any map Mara had ever seen. This was a map of the world as it looked thousands of years ago, before the rise of modern civilization, before human hands had shaped the land into what it was today. The Oracle stepped forward, and the map zoomed in on a location near the equator, an area Mara knew well. It was the site of an ancient civilization that had long since been wiped out. But this was not a time in history she had ever been taught in school. This was a time when the Earth was still young, a time when humans were not the dominant species, when they were just beginning their journey to become what they were today. Long before the Virex came to us, the Oracle began, his voice heavy with the weight of centuries. Humankind was not alone in its quest to ascend. There were others, races, civilizations, far older and far more advanced than anything you can comprehend. These beings, they touched the very fabric of reality itself. Some left their mark on Earth. Others fled to the stars, leaving behind only whispers of their existence. The map shifted again, zooming in on ancient ruins that had once been the home of a great and powerful race. The ruins glowed with a faint, ethereal light. It was not the light of the sun or the stars, but something different, something almost alive. Mara watched in stunned silence, her mind struggling to grasp the enormity of what the Oracle was suggesting. These civilizations, the Oracle continued, were the architects of everything you now face. The Virex were not created out of malice. They were the result of an ancient experiment, a failed attempt to harness the power of the stars themselves. The Virex were once human, like you. They were part of a race that sought to transcend the limitations of flesh and mortality. But their quest for immortality came at a great cost. They became something else, something unrecognizable. Mara's heart skipped a beat. "Are you saying the Virex are human?" The Oracle nodded. "Yes, in the truest sense of the word. The Virex are the descendants of those who sought to conquer time and space, and they have paid the price. Their minds are still human, but their bodies are no longer bound by the same rules. They are creatures of pure will, driven by a singular purpose: to eradicate anything that threatens their twisted vision of perfection." The revelation hit Mara harder than she expected. She had been trained to see the Virex as monsters, faceless invaders who needed to be destroyed. But now, the truth was far more complicated. The Virex were not monsters. They were the tragic remnants of humanity's own past, a distorted reflection of what humanity could become if left unchecked. "But why now?" Mara asked, her voice tight. "Why haven't they shown themselves until now? Why come after us now?" The Oracle's expression darkened, his eyes momentarily filled with a depth of sorrow. "Because they have watched you. Watched as humanity's potential grew. They have been waiting for this moment, when you would reach the point where they once were. You are on the cusp of discovering something that could change everything, a power that could rival theirs. And they will stop at nothing to prevent it. Mara's mind was racing. A power that could rival the Virex? What could that possibly be? So, what exactly is it that you want me to do? Find it, the Oracle said simply. The power that humanity once harnessed, before it was lost to time. The artifact hidden beneath the earth. Only you can unlock its secrets. Mara stared at him, her mind reeling. The weight of his words sank in, and she knew that she was about to embark on a journey that could very well determine the future of humanity. But something about the Oracle's calm demeanor unsettled her. He spoke with the certainty of someone who had seen the future unfold, someone who knew exactly what would happen and what needed to be done. What is this artifact? Mara asked. And how do I find it? The Oracle smiled again, though this time there was no warmth in it. The artifact is a remnant of a time long forgotten. It is hidden in the place where humanity's first seeds were sown. It is a key, Lieutenant. A key to understanding the true power of your species. But you will not find it alone. You will need to seek the help of others, those who can guide you on this path. Time is running out. The Virex grow ever closer, and soon there will be no place left for you to hide. Mara's chest tightened, but there was no turning back now. She knew what she had to do. The Virex had given humanity no choice. And now, the sovereigns had placed the fate of the world on her shoulders. She turned to Tarek, who had been standing silently by her side, watching the exchange. He nodded to her, his face grim. You've heard him, Lieutenant. There's no more time to waste. Mara nodded, steeling herself for the journey ahead. The battle had just begun, and humanity's survival depended on finding a power buried in the past. She didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. She would face it head on. She had no other choice. Let's go, she said. It's time to wake up the past. The rumble of engines vibrated through Mara's chest as the convoy of heavily armored vehicles sped across the barren wastelands of Earth's once thriving heartlands. The sky above was a dark and foreboding gray, clouds swirling like an impending storm, and the air felt thick, heavy with dust from centuries of industrialization, now left to rot. It had only been days since the Virex had launched their full-scale invasion, but already the world seemed to be in the grip of death, as if the Earth itself was succumbing to an ancient, unseen force. Mara sat in the lead vehicle, her hand gripping the edge of her seat as she looked out through the tinted glass at the desolate world passing by. The once proud cities, those towering monuments to human ingenuity, were nothing but broken husks, smoldering ruins slowly being reclaimed by nature. The landscape outside was foreign to her, a world she had only read about in history books, a world where humanity had once flourished, its power and pride unparalleled. But that world was gone. 5 minutes to the drop zone. Tarek's voice crackled through the comms, pulling Mara from her thoughts. She nodded, tightening her grip on the weapon at her side. The mission ahead was unlike any she had ever undertaken. It wasn't just a battle against an enemy force. This was a race against time, a journey into the unknown. If the Oracle was right, the key to humanity's survival lay buried beneath the earth in a place that had been lost to history. And the Virex were already on their heels, hunting them down with a persistence that was both terrifying and relentless. Mara's mind drifted back to the Oracle's words. The artifact, the key to humanity's future. She still didn't fully understand what it was or why she was the one who had been chosen to find it. But there was no time to question it now. Her duty was clear. The convoy of vehicles screeched to a halt, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. Mara's fingers instinctively went to the weapon strap to her thigh, her eyes scanning the barren horizon for any signs of the enemy. The ground trembled beneath her feet as a low, ominous sound echoed in the distance, a sound she had come to associate with the Virex's approach. Everyone out, Mara barked. The soldiers around her scrambled to grab their gear, the urgency of the moment settling in. The time for hesitation was over, As Mara stepped out of the vehicle, her boots hitting the cracked earth with a dull thud, she scanned the area. They had arrived in a place that, once upon a time, had been an ancient city, now reduced to little more than jagged ruins and forgotten artifacts. If the Oracle's information was correct, the artifact they sought was hidden beneath the very heart of this forsaken place. "Stay sharp," Mara ordered, her voice steady but carrying the weight of command. "We don't know what we're dealing with down there." The team assembled, their faces grim and focused. They knew the risks. The Virex were relentless, and their technology was far superior to anything humanity had ever developed. But the stakes were higher now. This wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about saving the very future of the human race. With weapons drawn and shields activated, they advanced toward the ruins, the decaying remnants of a civilization long forgotten. The air was thick with the smell of decay and dust, a testament to the passage of time. It felt as though they were walking through the grave of an entire world, one that had fallen to its own ambition. Mara's thoughts briefly flickered back to her own life. She had never been one for philosophy or deep reflections, always too focused on the present, the mission. But now, in the silence of the ruins, she couldn't help but wonder if this was the end of a cycle. Had humanity reached its peak? Had it fallen, just like the ancient civilizations that had come before? And if so, could they rise again? Or was the human race destined to be just another casualty of time? The team moved quickly but cautiously, their boots echoing off the stone as they navigated the broken streets of the ruined city. It wasn't long before they arrived at the entrance to what looked like an ancient underground complex, its entrance hidden behind a wall of debris. Mara signaled to Tarek, who moved to clear the obstruction, his soldiers working in tandem to move the massive stones aside. The heavy, ancient doors groaned as they swung open, revealing a dark and foreboding passageway beyond. "Looks like we found it," Tarek muttered, his voice tinged with awe. Mara gave a curt nod, stepping forward into the darkness. The air down here was stale, a sharp contrast to the burning, sun-scorched surface above. She felt a sudden shiver run down her spine, the weight of history pressing in on her. The corridor stretched on, its walls covered in strange, alien symbols, symbols that no one, not even the best archaeologists or linguists, had been able to decipher. Yet, they felt familiar, almost as if they were meant for her to understand. The further they descended, the more oppressive the silence became. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the feeling of something ancient and powerful, something waiting to be awakened. The sense of dread grew, settling over Mara's shoulders like an invisible weight. They reached the heart of the complex after what felt like hours of winding corridors and stairwells. The chamber before them was massive, far larger than any structure Mara had ever seen. It was an altar, of sorts, though not in the traditional sense. The room was filled with towering stone pillars that glowed with an eerie, pulsating light, their surfaces etched with symbols that seemed to shift and change as they stared at them. At the center of the room was a pedestal, its surface smooth and black, a stark contrast to the ancient stone that surrounded it. Upon the pedestal rested a small object, its shape indistinguishable from anything Mara had ever seen. It was neither mechanical nor organic, but something in between, an object forged from materials that defied description, glowing faintly with a light that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of a heartbeat. "This is it," Mara whispered, her voice filled with awe. "The artifact." Tarek stepped forward, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Is it alive?" Mara didn't answer. She could feel the pull of the object, a sense of urgency that was both captivating and terrifying. The Oracle had said that only she could unlock its secrets, but how? What was she supposed to do? She reached out cautiously, her fingers brushing against the surface of the pedestal. The moment she made contact, a flash of light erupted from the object, blinding her for an instant. When her vision cleared, the world around her had changed. The chamber was still there, but it was different. The walls now seemed to hum with an energy she couldn't comprehend, and the symbols on the stone pillars were no longer shifting. They were alive, glowing with a power that seemed to surge through her veins. Her mind raced as the room seemed to twist and warp, her senses overwhelmed by an overwhelming surge of information. Then, a voice, cold, distant, and yet undeniably familiar, echoed in her mind. You are the one who has been chosen. The key has awakened, and with it, the power to save your people. But the path is not without sacrifice. You will be tested, Lieutenant Holt, tested beyond the limits of your strength and will. The choice is yours. Will you use this power to destroy, or will you risk everything to save humanity? The voice faded, leaving only a ringing silence in its wake. Mara stood there, her hand still hovering over the artifact, her mind reeling. The weight of the decision ahead bore down on her. The power she had unlocked, the artifact she had awakened, this was not just some weapon. This was something far greater, far more dangerous. It was a tool, yes, but it was also a burden. Lieutenant, Tarek's voice broke through her thoughts. What's happening? Are you okay? Mara blinked, pulling her hand away from the artifact. The room returned to its previous state, the symbols no longer glowing. She took a deep breath, steadying herself before turning to face her team. We need to get out of here, she said, her voice resolute. And we need to move quickly. The Virex are closer than we think, and we've just unlocked something that could change everything. But we're not ready for it. Not yet. The team nodded, their expressions hardened with the knowledge that the fight was far from over. They had found the artifact, but the true battle was just beginning. And somewhere, deep beneath the surface, the ancient forces that had shaped humanity's destiny were awakening once again. The convoy rattled over the fractured terrain, the sound of metal grinding against stone reverberating through the air like the ominous hum of an ancient war drum. Each vehicle in the convoy was a fortress of steel, its surface scraped raw by the jagged remnants of the earth. But Mara knew that even the mightiest machines of war could not protect them from what lay ahead. They were venturing into the unknown, an underground labyrinth that held the promise of salvation for humanity or its utter doom. Mara sat in the lead vehicle, her fingers wrapped around the cold metal of her weapon, her mind focused despite the nerves that flickered like distant stars at the edges of her thoughts. She had fought countless battles, but this was different. The Oracle had been cryptic in his words, suggesting that the artifact they were searching for was far more than an ancient weapon. It was something much older, much more dangerous, a relic of a time long forgotten, linked to the origins of humanity itself. The vehicle's suspension creaked as it traversed the uneven ground, and Mara glanced out of the thick windows. The world outside was grim and desolate. The ruined cities, once sprawling metropolises of gleaming steel and glass, were now reduced to nothing more than charred skeletons. Nature had begun reclaiming the land, but not in the way it was supposed to. The ground was stained with the scars of humanity's rise and fall, an eternal reminder of how quickly greatness could be undone. As the convoy neared the entrance to the ruins, an old, buried city that had been lost to time, Mara's pulse quickened. She knew the Virex were not far behind. Their advanced technology, their relentless pursuit, made them nearly impossible to outrun. The clock was ticking, and every second they wasted could mean the difference between humanity's survival and its obliteration. The vehicles screeched to a halt in unison, raising a cloud of dust that hung heavy in the air. The sound of engines dying down was deafening in the silence that followed. Outside, the team of soldiers moved with precision, checking their equipment, ensuring every weapon was primed and ready for the fight ahead. Mara signaled for Tarek, her second-in-command, to approach. Tarek, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a permanent frown etched into his face, nodded as he stepped forward, his boots crunching against the dry earth. His eyes were narrowed in concentration, scanning the surroundings for any signs of enemy movement. We're at the drop zone, Mara said, her voice steady but laced with the tension that had been building ever since the Oracle's message. What do we know about the ruins? Tarek glanced down at the data pad in his hand, his brow furrowing. Not much. The records are fragmented at best. It was an ancient civilization, long since wiped out by time or catastrophe. The entrance we're looking for is deep within the city, beneath the ruins. It's an old underground complex, one that may have once been used for religious or ceremonial purposes. Mara nodded, already thinking ahead. And the artifact? Tarek looked up from the data pad, his gaze meeting hers. If the Oracle's intel is right, the artifact is somewhere within that complex. Whatever it is, it's ancient. More than just technology, it's part of humanity's forgotten past, something even the Virex don't understand. Mara tightened her grip on the weapon in her hand. The Oracle had made it clear that the artifact was their only hope for survival. But how could a mere object, however powerful, change the course of the war? They were up against an enemy with technology that could bend reality itself, a race of beings who had evolved beyond the limitations of flesh and blood. Whatever this artifact was, it had to be powerful enough to match the Virex. All right, Mara said, her voice calm but commanding. Let's move out. Stay sharp. We don't know what we're going to encounter down there, but we can't afford to waste any time. With that, the team gathered their gear, checking weapons and supplies, ready for whatever lay ahead. They formed a tight formation as they approached the entrance to the underground complex, a massive stone archway partially concealed by rubble. The air grew colder the closer they got, and an odd, oppressive silence hung over the ruins, as if the very earth was holding its breath. Tarek gave the signal to proceed, and one by one, the soldiers filed into the archway. Mara took the rear, keeping a vigilant eye on their surroundings, her instincts telling her that danger was closer than they realized. The tunnel beneath the ruins was a labyrinth of narrow corridors and chambers that stretched deep into the heart of the earth. The walls were slick with moisture, and the air was thick with dust and the smell of something ancient, something long forgotten. As they descended further into the depths, the temperature dropped, and a faint hum seemed to reverberate through the stone, like the pulse of some unseen machine. The deeper they went, the more the ruins began to reveal their secrets. The walls were covered in strange, intricate symbols, alien designs that shifted and changed as they moved past them. No one in the team could make sense of the markings, but Mara felt an unease in her gut. This wasn't just an ancient city. It was a place of power, a place where forces beyond her comprehension had once been wielded. The team continued to press forward, their footsteps echoing off the stone as they navigated the winding paths. It was eerily quiet, save for the occasional distant rumble that seemed to shake the ground beneath them. The sounds of their breathing, of weapons shifting in their hands, seemed amplified in the stillness, as if the ruins were listening, waiting. Mara's thoughts drifted back to the Oracle's words. The Virex were once human, like you. They were part of a race that sought to transcend the limitations of flesh and mortality. But their quest for immortality came at a great cost. What had the Oracle meant? The Virex were not just invaders. They were humanity's failed future, a twisted reflection of what humanity could become if it lost its way. But why had they come to Earth? What was their true purpose? Mara. Tarek's voice cut through her thoughts, sharp and urgent. We've reached the central chamber. She looked ahead and saw it, an enormous cavern, its walls lined with towering stone columns that seemed to pulse with an energy of their own. At the center of the room, resting upon a pedestal made of dark, polished stone, was the object they had come for. The artifact. It was small, no larger than a human hand, and its surface shimmered with an iridescent glow, like liquid metal caught in the light. Mara felt an almost magnetic pull towards it, as if the object itself was calling to her. She moved forward, drawn by an invisible force, her heart pounding in her chest. Wait, Tarek cautioned, his voice low. Something's not right. Before Mara could respond, the ground trembled beneath their feet, and a low, guttural noise filled the chamber. It was a sound that sent a chill down her spine, a sound she had only heard once before, in the heat of battle when the Virex had made their first strike. The Virex were here. A sudden flash of blinding light filled the room, and when it cleared, Mara saw them, Virex soldiers, their bodies shimmering with a strange, liquid-like armor, emerging from the shadows. Their eyes were black, empty voids, and their forms were grotesque, far from the human-like shape they had once possessed. The transformation was complete. "Get back!" Mara shouted, instinctively drawing her weapon and raising her shield. The team scrambled into defensive positions, but the Virex were too fast. With inhuman speed, they surged forward, their weapons crackling with energy. The air erupted with the sound of gunfire as the two forces collided, but Mara knew it was a losing battle. The Virex were too powerful, too advanced. They would overwhelm them in moments. The artifact, her only hope, was now the target. "We need to get to the artifact," Mara yelled, pushing through the chaos. Now, she rushed forward, but the Virex soldiers were closing in. Just as one of them lunged at her with a bladed weapon, she raised her rifle and fired, the blast sending the creature reeling backward. But more were coming, too many to count. With a desperate final push, Mara dove toward the pedestal, reaching for the artifact. As her fingers brushed against its surface, a surge of energy coursed through her body, and everything around her seemed to freeze. For a brief, breathless moment, Mara felt the weight of an entire civilization pressing down on her, an ancient power, a secret buried for millennia, awakening within her. The voice, the Oracle's voice, whispered in her mind again. "The choice is yours. Use it to destroy, or use it to save." But the Virex were closing in. She had no more time to hesitate. Mara closed her eyes, gripped the artifact tightly, and made her choice. And the world exploded. The air seemed to vibrate around Mara, a low hum emanating from the artifact in her hands. Her vision blurred, the world around her twisting as if reality itself were bending. Her pulse thudded in her ears, and every breath felt like it was pushing against an invisible force. She could feel the ancient power of the artifact coursing through her veins, its energy unlocking something deep within her. A flood of memories, of images long buried in her mind, began to resurface. They were not her memories, not entirely, but they felt familiar, like fragments of an ancient life that had been passed down through the ages. The world around her had come to a halt. The Virex soldiers were frozen in mid-motion, their grotesque forms caught in a moment of time, as if they had been stopped by some unseen hand. The chamber, too, seemed suspended in time, the flickering light from the stone pillars casting strange, shifting shadows. Mara blinked, trying to clear the haze from her mind, but the power of the artifact was overwhelming. It felt as though it was speaking to her, its energy syncing with her own, feeding her thoughts, filling the empty spaces in her understanding. The Oracle's words echoed in her head, clearer now. "You are the one chosen to wield it, to unlock the path forward. But you must decide, Mara Holt. Will you use this power to destroy, or will you use it to save humanity?" Her hands trembled as she held the artifact. Her thoughts raced, her mind caught in the throes of a battle she hadn't expected. She had always been a soldier, a leader, a pragmatist. Her world had been built on hard choices, sacrifices made for the greater good. But this was something beyond anything she had ever imagined. The artifact wasn't just a tool or a weapon. It was something far older, far more profound. Its power wasn't bound by the same rules she had lived by. It was a force that could reshape the very fabric of existence. She glanced around at the Virex soldiers, still frozen in place, their black eyes vacant and lifeless. She could feel their presence, could sense their desperation, their hunger for destruction. They were not here by accident. They were drawn to this place, to the artifact, and they would stop at nothing to claim it. The weight of her decision pressed down on her chest, suffocating her. She had seen what the Virex were capable of, their unrelenting pursuit of humanity's extinction. They were not just invaders, they were a twisted reflection of what humanity could become. But what if the artifact could change everything? What if this power, this ancient force, could give them the edge they needed to win? Her fingers curled tighter around the artifact, and a sudden surge of energy coursed through her, pushing her back. Her vision flashed, and in that moment, she saw it, a glimpse of the past, of a civilization that had once harnessed this power to create, to build, to reach for the stars. She saw human beings, their bodies augmented by technology, their minds expanded to the limits of comprehension. They were not gods, but they had achieved something remarkable, something that had transcended the boundaries of their mortal existence. And then, she saw the fall. The civilization that had wielded the artifact had risen too high, too quickly. They had stretched their hands too far, reaching for power they were not ready for. The artifact had not been a gift, but a test, one that required humility, wisdom, and restraint. The people who had sought to use it had failed. They had allowed their hubris to consume them, and in the end, the artifact had been sealed away, hidden deep beneath the earth, forgotten by time. But the Virex had found it. They had come, not to seek salvation, but to finish what had been started, to transcend humanity and create something new, something beyond the reach of their own mortality. They had failed, too. The artifact was not something that could be wielded without consequence. Mara's heart raced as she fought to hold on to her sense of self. She was not like them. She had to be different. She had to be the one who could use the artifact to save humanity, not destroy it. But how? The artifact hummed louder in her hands, its power growing stronger, almost as if it were waiting for her to act. The voices of the past, the memories of those who had come before, filled her mind. The knowledge was there, if she could just grasp it. It was ancient, buried beneath layers of time and fear, but it was clear now. She understood. She raised the artifact higher, her grip steady, her eyes focused on the frozen figures of the Virex soldiers. The energy within her surged again, but this time, she controlled it. She wasn't just holding the artifact. She was connecting with it, becoming one with it. The power was raw, untamed, but she was the conduit, the bridge between the past and the future. The Virex began to twitch, their forms flickering as if they were struggling against an invisible force. The time that had held them frozen began to unravel, but Mara's will held them in place. She could feel their hatred, their fear, their desperation to break free. But she was stronger now. She could feel the artifact's power bending to her will, the energy it offered her flowing like a river through her body, filling her mind with clarity. And then, in a flash of brilliance, everything changed. The walls of the chamber trembled, the stone pillars vibrating with the intensity of the artifact's energy. A pulse of light radiated from the pedestal, sweeping across the room like a tidal wave. The Virex soldiers screeched, their bodies contorting as they were torn from their frozen states. Their weapons crackled with energy, and their forms shimmered with the power of the transformation they had undergone. But they were no longer the same. The light from the artifact engulfed them, and as it faded, the Virex soldiers were no longer grotesque and alien. They had been changed. Their bodies were still covered in the shimmering liquid armor, but their faces, their eyes, they were human again. The transformation was not complete. They stood motionless for a moment, their eyes wide, filled with confusion. Mara could see it in their expressions. This was not the victory they had expected. The artifact had not transformed them into gods. It had brought them back to their roots, to their humanity, and in doing so, stripped them of their power. The chamber was silent. Mara slowly lowered the artifact, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She felt drained, as if the energy within her had been spent in an instant. But she had done it. She had stopped the Virex, not by destroying them, but by returning them to what they once were, human. Her gaze flicked to the team, who were still recovering from the shock of what had just transpired. Tarek was the first to speak, his voice filled with disbelief. "Mara, what did you do?" Mara looked at him, her eyes still distant, lost in the aftermath of what had just happened. I didn't destroy them. I. I restored them. Tarek's face twisted with confusion. Restored them? What does that mean? She shook her head, her thoughts still spinning. I don't know, but I felt it. This power. It didn't just kill. It reversed what they had become. It's like they were given a second chance. Tarek glanced at the Virex soldiers, who now stood frozen, their eyes no longer empty but filled with the same confusion and fear Mara had seen in humans who had been through the horrors of war. For a moment, they were not the enemy. They were just people, lost, broken, and confused. But that didn't mean they were no longer dangerous. We don't have much time, Mara said, her voice firm once more. We need to get out of here before they regain control. She turned toward the exit, her steps quickening as she led the team back toward the surface. The artifact pulsed gently in her hand, as if in response to her decision. There was still much to understand, much to learn about its power. But one thing was clear: the choice had been made, and humanity's future had just been rewritten. As they ascended, the weight of what had happened began to settle over Mara. She had made the first step, but this was only the beginning. What came next, she wasn't sure. But she was ready to face it, no matter the cost. Mara stood on the surface of the ruined city, the sun setting on the horizon. Its light barely pierced the thick clouds hanging in the sky, casting the land beneath it in an eerie twilight glow. She could hear the distant hum of the remaining convoy vehicles, their engines vibrating against the silence. But her mind was elsewhere, caught in the aftermath of what had just occurred beneath the surface. The Virex were no longer the monstrous invaders they had been. They had been reverted, stripped of their grotesque forms and returned to the state they had once known: human. But how long would that last? Could the artifact's power truly cleanse them of their transformation? Or had it only delayed their inevitable return to their previous alien state? More importantly, what did this mean for the future of the war? Mara's fingers absently traced the contours of the artifact, which still rested in her hand. It hummed softly, an almost imperceptible vibration that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. She had expected the power to drain from her after using it, but it was still there, persistent, insistent. Every time she touched it, she could feel the ancient knowledge it contained pushing against the edges of her consciousness, as if trying to share its secrets. Commander Holt? Tarek's voice cut through her reverie, and she turned to see him approaching, his face a mixture of concern and curiosity. We're ready to move, he said, glancing over his shoulder at the rest of the team. But we need to talk about what happened down there. Mara nodded, her lips pressing into a thin line. She didn't need to hear it from Tarek to know what he was thinking. The team had seen everything, had witnessed the transformation of the Virex and the power of the artifact firsthand. They had all felt the intensity of it, the strange force that had surged through the chamber when the artifact had been activated. No one knew exactly what they had unleashed. I know, Mara said, her voice low. We'll discuss it once we're out of here. But for now, we move. The longer we stay, the more likely it is that we'll be caught by another Virex patrol. Tarek hesitated but nodded. He knew better than to argue with her when she was focused like this. The team had been through enough already. They had to get out of the ruins, back to the convoy, and figure out their next steps. And they needed to do it quickly. The group fell in line behind Mara as she led them back toward the convoy. The once pristine landscape, full of untapped potential, had been ravaged by war, leaving only a shell of what had once existed. The shadows cast by the crumbling buildings seemed to grow longer as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the wind howled through the empty streets like a mournful cry. As they approached the convoy, the soldiers who had remained behind kept a watchful eye on the surrounding area. The tension in the air was palpable. Mara could feel the unease settling in her chest, like a lead weight. Something wasn't right. Mara climbed into the passenger seat and looked out over the rest of the team as they settled into the other vehicles. Everyone was visibly shaken, some still processing the surreal events of the last few hours. Mara's mind, however, was already racing ahead, calculating their next move, the implications of what had happened beneath the earth, and the broader impact of their encounter with the Virex. What now? Tarek asked, stepping into the vehicle behind her and slamming the door shut. He had clearly been waiting for her to make the next move. "We get to the extraction point," Mara replied, her voice firm. "And we regroup. We need to assess the situation and figure out where we stand. The Virex may be temporarily human, but that doesn't mean we can afford to relax." She paused, glancing back at the others. Their faces were a mix of exhaustion and disbelief, and Mara could feel the weight of their expectations. They were looking to her for answers, for guidance, but she wasn't sure she had any to give. She had done the unthinkable, changed the course of the war with the artifact. But the questions were mounting, and with each passing minute, they grew more pressing. "We don't know how long the change will last," she continued, her voice unwavering. "We don't know what the Virex's true capabilities are, what their ultimate goals are. They may have lost their grotesque forms, but they still have their intelligence, their drive. And they won't stop, which is why we need to move quickly," Tarek interjected. "We can't let them regroup. They'll come after us the moment they realize what's happened. They'll want the artifact back." Mara nodded, feeling a familiar chill run down her spine. The artifact was the key to everything. Its power was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, and the Virex, whatever they had become, would stop at nothing to regain control of it. But she couldn't just hand it over. Not after what she had seen, not after everything she had learned about the artifact's true nature. It was their only hope, not just for survival, but for something greater, something that could change the very course of human history. "We'll head for the extraction point," Mara said, her tone resolute. "We'll rendezvous with the rest of the fleet and figure out our next steps. But we need to be prepared for anything." As the convoy began to move, Mara allowed herself a moment of reflection. The ruins they had left behind were nothing more than a hollow shell of a once great civilization. Whatever had happened there, whatever had caused the fall of that ancient society, was something far beyond their understanding. But the artifact was real, and it had power, power that could either save humanity or lead to its final destruction. The convoy drove on through the night, the road ahead long and uncertain. The team remained alert, their eyes scanning the horizon, watching for any sign of movement. But it was eerily quiet, the world around them still as if holding its breath. Hours passed, and the convoy made slow progress through the barren landscape. Mara's mind kept returning to the Virex soldiers, now human again, or at least seemingly so. What did this mean for them? Were they truly different now, or would they eventually revert to their former, monstrous selves? And what of the artifact? The power it contained was undeniable, but was it something they could control? She closed her eyes and leaned back in her seat, trying to push the thoughts from her mind. They had to focus on the present. The future was too uncertain, too dangerous to predict. Eventually, they reached the extraction point, an abandoned military base hidden deep within the mountains. The fleet was waiting for them, a small armada of vehicles and ships, ready to transport them to safety. But Mara knew that the true battle was far from over. The Virex were not finished. They would return, and when they did, they would be stronger, more determined than ever. As the convoy came to a halt, Mara felt the weight of the moment settle over her. They had survived. They had made it out of the ruins, but the war was far from over. The artifact was now in her possession, and it was up to her to wield it wisely. But she couldn't do it alone. She needed her team, her family, and together, they would face whatever came next. "We rest here," Mara said, her voice steady. "But stay vigilant. The war is far from over." With that, she stepped out of the vehicle and surveyed the base, the cold wind whipping around her. The next chapter of this war was about to begin, and Mara Holt would be ready for it. She had no choice. The fate of humanity depended on it. The nights after their arrival at the military base were cold, the wind cutting through the mountainous terrain like a blade. Mara couldn't remember the last time she had slept peacefully. The constant tension, the weight of her decisions, and the uncertainty of the days ahead made it impossible to relax. Instead, She found herself staring into the dark expanse of the sky, her mind racing with thoughts of the future. The base was a fortress, a relic from an era long past, tucked away in the shadow of towering peaks. Its steel walls and reinforced bunkers were well suited for the harsh environment, but nothing about it felt safe, not now. Every sound in the night felt amplified, every shadow a potential threat. She couldn't shake the feeling that the Virex were already moving, already plotting their next move. Mara walked along the perimeter of the base, her boots crunching against the gravel as she inspected the outer defenses. The soldiers on duty stood at attention, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon for any signs of movement. Tarek had insisted on increasing security, and though Mara agreed, she still felt a nagging sense of unease. It wasn't just the Virex they had to worry about anymore. It was the power of the artifact, what it was doing to her, and what it could do to the world if they didn't understand it fully. The night was quiet, too quiet. Mara had grown used to the hum of machines, the chatter of soldiers, and the distant sounds of conflict. But here, in the mountains, the silence was unnerving. It made the mind wander, made her second-guess every decision she had made. She couldn't help but wonder if the artifact had changed her in ways she didn't understand. Had it left a mark on her soul? Would she be able to control its power? Or would it consume her as it had consumed the civilization that had once wielded it? Mara, Tarek's voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to see him walking toward her, his expression serious. "You need to rest. You've been at this for hours." "I'm fine," Mara replied, her tone flat. "We need to make sure the base is secure." Tarek raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "We've already reinforced the perimeter. The soldiers are on high alert. If the Virex are coming, they'll be here soon enough, but we need to be ready. And that means you need to get some sleep." "I can't afford to rest," Mara said quietly, her gaze shifting toward the horizon. "Not while there's still so much we don't understand about the artifact." Tarek was silent for a moment, then placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know, but you're not alone in this, Mara. We'll figure it out together. You've done more than enough for one day." Mara met his gaze, and for the first time in hours, she allowed herself to soften. "I don't know what's happening to me," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The power from the artifact, it's like it's inside me now. I can feel it, and I don't know how to control it. I'm scared." Tarek's expression softened. "You're not alone in this. Whatever's happening, we'll figure it out. But you can't do this if you're running on empty. We need you at your best." Mara nodded, though doubt lingered in the back of her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The artifact had given her incredible power, yes, but at what cost? What was it doing to her body, to her mind? And what would happen if she couldn't control it? "All right," she said finally. "I'll get some rest. But don't think I'm going to let my guard down." Tarek smiled, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "I wouldn't dream of it." Mara turned and headed toward the barracks, her mind still racing. The bed was cold, the thin blanket barely enough to ward off the chill of the mountain air. She lay there, staring at the ceiling, but sleep didn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of images, visions of people, of worlds, of the civilization that had once wielded the artifact. It was as if the power was trying to speak to her, trying to show her something. But what? The hours stretched on, and she finally gave up on sleep. She slipped out of bed and made her way to the command center, hoping that the quiet hum of the base's operations would provide some distraction. The command center was dimly lit, the screens flickering with data and reports from the surrounding region. Soldiers moved in and out, relaying information about the surrounding area, but the air was thick with tension. It was clear that everyone felt it, the sense that something was coming, something they weren't prepared for. "Mara," Lila said, glancing up from her station as Mara entered. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," Mara replied, her gaze scanning the room. "Anything new?" Lila shook her head. "Nothing out of the ordinary. No sign of the Virex forces moving in. But we're keeping watch. We have scouts on the ground, and everything seems clear for now." Mara nodded absently, her eyes lingering on one of the screens. The data flowing across it was like a blur: coordinates, maps, military positions, but something caught her attention. A small anomaly in the readings. It was faint, but it was there. "Zoom in on Sector 6, she said, pointing to the map. Lila quickly manipulated the controls, and the screen zoomed in on the designated sector. The anomaly was more apparent now, a flicker in the data, something that didn't belong. "Can you trace that?" Mara asked. Lila frowned, adjusting the controls. "I'm trying. It's strange. It doesn't look like anything we've seen before. It could be a glitch, but it's too consistent to be random." Mara leaned in closer, her instincts kicking in. It wasn't just a glitch. It was something deliberate, something moving beneath the surface. "It's a signal," she said slowly. "Someone's sending a message." Lila stared at the screen, her brow furrowing. "A message from who?" "That's what we need to figure out," Mara replied, her voice sharp with realization. "We're not alone here. The Virex may have been the only threat we knew about, but this is something different." Tarek entered the command center just then, his face tight with concern. "What's going on?" "We're picking up a strange signal," Mara said. "It's coming from somewhere nearby, but it's not Virex. It's something else." Tarek's eyes narrowed as he approached the console. "Could it be a trap?" "Possibly," Mara said, turning to Lila. "Can you get a more precise location?" Lila worked quickly, her fingers flying over the controls. "It's coming from an abandoned facility about 10 miles to the west. There's nothing on the map about it. It's like it doesn't exist." Mara exchanged a look with Tarek, the weight of the situation settling in. "We're going to investigate. Prepare a team." Tarek nodded. "I'll get the others ready." As he left, Mara remained by the console, her mind whirring with questions. The artifact had already changed the game, but this was something new. The Virex had never used stealth tactics like this. Whoever or whatever was behind the signal was different. And if they were allied with the Virex, they could be even more dangerous. Lila finished her report and turned to Mara, her face pale. "Are you sure about this? It could be a trap." "I don't have a choice," Mara said grimly. "We have to know what's out there. We can't afford to be blindsided again." Lila nodded, though her expression didn't ease. She knew the risks. They all did. But there was no turning back now. Mara turned away from the screen and headed toward the hangar, where the team was assembling. The sun had barely begun to rise, casting long shadows across the base. As she stepped out into the cold morning air, she felt the weight of what lay ahead. There were things lurking out there, things she couldn't yet understand. But whatever it was, she would face it head on. The enemy was not just the Virex anymore. It was something more insidious, something unseen. And Mara was determined to uncover the truth before it was too late. The morning air was frigid as Mara and her team prepared for their journey into the mountains. The remnants of the previous night's cold still hung in the air, biting at exposed skin. The convoy of vehicles, each a fortified relic of past wars, was lined up and ready. Soldiers were scattered about, double-checking weapons, packing supplies, and reviewing plans. Despite the seeming calm, there was a palpable tension in the air. Everyone knew the risks. They weren't just venturing into unknown territory. They were hunting a shadow, something they didn't fully understand. Mara stood beside the lead vehicle, her hands gloved against the cold as she checked the equipment strapped to her tactical vest. Her mind was still preoccupied with the strange signal they had discovered the night before. Whoever or whatever had sent it was no friend of theirs, and Mara could feel the weight of that truth in her gut. The artifact was far from the only thing they needed to worry about now. The signal hinted at something bigger, something lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Tarek approached, his face set in grim lines as he surveyed the convoy. "We're ready to move," he said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of unspoken words. He paused for a moment, looking at Mara. "Are you sure about this? We don't know what we're walking into." Mara nodded, her resolve unwavering despite the uncertainty gnawing at her. "We don't have a choice. If there's something out there, we need to know what it is. before it finds us first. Tarek studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. All right, let's get this over with. The convoy set off, the rumble of engines shaking the earth beneath their feet as they began their journey. The narrow, winding roads twisted through jagged mountain ranges, the air growing thinner and colder with every passing mile. The terrain was unforgiving, but it wasn't just the environment that kept Mara on edge. It was the eerie silence surrounding them. There was no sign of life, no sign of activity from the Virex or anything else. It was as though the world had been emptied of everything but them. As the convoy pressed on, Mara sat in the passenger seat of the lead vehicle, her eyes scanning the landscape. The mountainous terrain was rough, but not unfamiliar to her. She had spent enough time in hostile environments to know that the land itself could be as deadly as any enemy. But there was something off about this place. The way the mountains seemed to loom over them, casting long shadows despite the brightening sky. The distant peaks were jagged, like the teeth of some great beast, and the valleys between them felt too still. Something's wrong, Lila said from the driver's seat, her voice low but laced with unease. Mara turned her gaze to the young woman, who was focusing on the road ahead with tense eyes. What do you mean? I don't know. It's like we're being watched, Lila replied, her grip on the wheel tightening. I can't shake the feeling that something's out there, keeping an eye on us. Mara considered this for a moment, then nodded. Keep your eyes peeled. We're not the only ones out here. The convoy continued to wind its way through the mountains, the minutes stretching into hours. The further they went, the more oppressive the silence became. There were no birds chirping, no wildlife rustling in the underbrush, nothing to break the stillness. It was as though nature itself had retreated from this place, leaving nothing but barren rock and ice. As they drew closer to the coordinates of the signal, Mara's mind raced. The artifact's hum, a constant presence that had settled somewhere deep within her, was growing louder. She could feel it, like a heartbeat inside her chest, pulsing with power, with an ancient, undeniable force. It was as if the artifact was reacting to something in the distance. The convoy reached a narrow pass between two towering cliffs, the road barely wide enough to accommodate the vehicles. The terrain here was even more treacherous, the rocks slick with frost, and the path so steep that the vehicles had to inch forward carefully, one slow turn at a time. Lila glanced nervously in the rearview mirror. We're almost there. The signal's coming from somewhere near the top of the ridge. Mara looked up, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the rocky terrain ahead. There, nestled against the mountainside, was an old facility, abandoned, weathered by time, but unmistakable in its stark, angular design. It was a relic of a time long past, a structure that had been built to withstand anything. There were no signs of life, no movement around it. But the signal was undeniable. It was coming from there. Stop the convoy, Mara ordered, her voice cutting through the stillness. Lila obeyed, bringing the vehicle to a slow halt just below the ridge. The rest of the convoy followed suit, the sound of engines dying down, leaving only the crunch of snow beneath tires and the wind howling through the mountains. Mara took a deep breath, feeling the cold air bite at her skin as she stepped out of the vehicle. The team disembarked as well, weapons in hand, each soldier moving with practiced precision. Tarek was by her side in an instant, his expression unreadable. We're close, he said, scanning the facility with a critical eye. Looks like no one's been here in years. But that doesn't mean it's safe, Mara nodded. Stay alert. Something doesn't feel right about this place. The group moved forward, carefully making their way toward the facility. The building was massive, a sprawling complex of concrete and metal that seemed to sink into the mountain itself. Its windows were dark, long since shattered or covered by decades of neglect. As they approached, Mara felt the weight of history pressing down on her. This place, this forgotten outpost, was more than just an abandoned structure. It was a remnant of something that had been left behind, something that had once been important. They reached the entrance, a set of heavy metal doors that had been sealed shut by years of rust and decay. Tarek stepped forward, applying pressure to the door with his shoulder. The metal groaned in protest before it slowly began to give way. With a final push, the door was thrown open, revealing a darkened hallway that seemed to stretch endlessly into the heart of the facility. Mara held her breath as the team moved in, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The air inside was thick, stale, as if it had been undisturbed for years. The walls were lined with ancient equipment, machines that looked like they belonged in another era, their purpose long forgotten. The dim light of their flashlights flickered off dusty surfaces, casting long shadows that seemed to dance in the corners. "This place is ancient," Tarek muttered, his voice reverberating in the empty space. What was this place used for? Mara didn't respond immediately, her gaze sweeping across the room. There were no signs of life, but there was something that felt wrong. The signal was stronger now, almost deafening in its intensity. It was as if it was guiding them, urging them forward. They moved deeper into the complex, passing through a series of corridors that seemed to spiral inward. The air grew colder as they descended, the temperature dropping with every step. It was as if the mountain itself was trying to swallow them whole. And then, at the end of the hall, they found it. A large chamber, its walls lined with strange, alien-looking technology, stood before them. In the center of the room, on a raised platform, was a device, similar in appearance to the artifact Mara had come into contact with, but far larger, more intricate. It hummed with an energy that filled the air, crackling and pulsating like a heartbeat. Mara stepped forward, the hum of the artifact inside her growing louder in response. She could feel the pull, the connection between the two objects, like twin hearts beating in unison, synchronized across space and time. This is it," Mara whispered, her voice barely audible. "This is what the signal was leading us to." Tarek moved cautiously to her side, his eyes fixed on the device. "What is it?" Mara didn't answer. She didn't know, but she could feel the power of it, and it scared her more than she was willing to admit. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence, a voice that seemed to echo from every corner of the room, a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate through her bones. "You should not have come here." Mara's blood ran cold as the voice filled the space, and the room seemed to shift around them. It was then that Mara realized they were no longer alone. They had walked into a trap set long ago, one that had been waiting for them all along. The voice that echoed through the chamber was not one of flesh and blood. It was deep, reverberating with a resonance that seemed to come from everywhere at once, an omnipresent, ancient hum that tugged at Mara's very soul. The words it spoke were not loud, but they carried a weight so profound that they froze everyone in place, as if the air itself had become heavy. "You should not have come here." Mara's pulse quickened. She instinctively reached for her weapon, but her hand faltered. Her eyes darted to the rest of her team, their faces tense and uncertain. The voice had not come from any of them, and the source of the ominous words seemed to come from all directions, within the very walls of the complex, from the depths of the ground beneath them, and from the air they breathed. "What was that?" Lila whispered, her voice tight with fear, but Mara could see the same realization in her eyes. "We're not alone," Mara muttered, her voice low and steady. "Whatever's controlling this place, it knows we're here." Tarek stepped forward, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his weapon. "It's a warning. Whoever or whatever built this place, they don't want us here." The team shifted uneasily, but Mara could feel the pull of the device in the center of the room, its hum growing stronger as she moved closer. She didn't know what it was, but it was undeniable. This object, this artifact, was somehow connected to the force that had spoken to them. It was drawing her in. "We don't have a choice," Mara said, her voice unwavering. "We need to understand what this is, before it understands us." Tarek hesitated for a moment, his eyes scanning the room with caution. "Are you sure about this?" Mara's gaze locked on the artifact in the center of the room. She could feel it, pulsing with energy, its power humming in the air like a steady heartbeat. It wasn't just a piece of technology. It was something far more ancient, far more powerful. And it was calling to her. I'm sure, Mara said, her voice resolute. We can't walk away from this now. The signal, it's coming from this room for a reason. Slowly, she moved toward the platform where the device rested. The air seemed to grow colder with every step, the darkness of the room pressing in on her. The artifact's glow brightened as she approached, casting strange shadows on the walls. There were symbols etched into its surface, symbols she recognized from the artifact she had once held. But these were different, more intricate, more complex. As Mara reached the platform, the voice spoke again, though this time it seemed quieter, almost contemplative. You were drawn to the power, aren't you? Just like all those who came before you. Mara froze. The words felt personal, aimed directly at her. Her mind raced, her breath quickening. The artifact, this was no ordinary device. It was sentient, aware of her presence, aware of her connection to the power it contained. You are not the first, the voice continued. Many have sought to claim what lies within, but none have succeeded. None have lived to speak of it. Tarek moved to stand beside her, his hand still gripping his weapon. What is this place? Who are you? There was a pause, the air thick with tension, and then the voice answered, its tone colder now. I am the Echo. I was once the keeper of knowledge, of power. But time has passed, and those who built me are no more. I was left behind, a relic of their ambition. Mara's brow furrowed. You're an artificial intelligence? In a sense, the voice replied. I was created to guard the power, to preserve the knowledge of those who sought to harness it. But now, I am more. I am the last remnant of a civilization that fell because it reached too far, too fast. You are playing with forces you do not understand. Mara felt a chill run down her spine. The voice's words were heavy with the weight of history, and its warnings were not to be taken lightly. She could feel it in her bones. This wasn't just an advanced machine. This was something far older, something more powerful, a remnant of a time and a people long lost. We're not here to claim anything, Mara said, her voice steady despite the rising unease within her. We're here to understand what happened, why this place was abandoned, why you're still here. The Echo's response was slow, as if it were considering her words. You think you can understand it? You think you can control it? The voice paused, its tone almost amused. None before you have succeeded. You cannot wield this power without consequence. There are always consequences. Mara's eyes narrowed. We've survived things before. We'll survive this too. You misunderstand, the Echo said. It is not about survival. It is about corruption. Power corrupts all who seek it, and those who wield it without understanding will ultimately be consumed by it. Mara hesitated. The Echo's words struck a chord deep within her, reminding her of the way the artifact had begun to change her. She could feel its influence, its pulse resonating within her chest, filling her with a hunger she couldn't name. The power was seductive. She could already feel it gnawing at her, urging her to reach out, to claim it, to unleash its full potential. But she knew that the Echo was right. They had to understand what they were dealing with. If they didn't, the consequences would be unimaginable. We don't want to control it, Mara said softly, her gaze fixed on the device. We want to learn from it, to stop the cycle before it destroys us all. The Echo was silent for a moment, and when it spoke again, its voice was laced with something that almost resembled pity. You are like the others. You believe you can stop what has already begun, but you cannot. The power is too great, and it will not be denied. The ground beneath Mara's feet seemed to tremble, and for a moment, the air itself seemed to shimmer with a strange energy. She stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest as the temperature in the room dropped even further. It was as if the artifact was reacting to the conversation, responding to the Echo's words. We've come this far, Tarek said, his voice unwavering. We're not turning back now. We need to know what happened here, what you were guarding. The Echo's voice grew softer, almost mournful. I was not guarding knowledge. I was guarding a secret, one that you are not ready to know. You are not prepared for the truth of what lies within. Mara's breath hitched as she felt something shift in the room. The hum of the artifact grew louder, more intense, and the air seemed to crackle with energy. She could sense it now, something in the depths of the artifact, something ancient, something vast, was stirring. The power was waking. Whatever is inside it, we'll face it together, Mara said, her voice filled with resolve. Show us. The silence that followed was almost suffocating. Then, without warning, the room began to change. The walls around them seemed to fade, becoming translucent, like a veil lifting to reveal a hidden truth. Mara blinked, and before her stood a vision, not of the present, but of the past. The room was filled with light, bright and blinding, and before her stood figures, tall, regal, their faces unreadable, their eyes shining with intelligence and power. They were unlike any beings Mara had ever seen, their features sleek and alien, yet strangely human. They were the creators, the ones who had built this place, the ones who had sought to harness the power of the artifact. And as Mara watched, the vision unfolded before her eyes, a history of ambition and downfall, of knowledge and hubris, of a civilization that had reached too far and paid the ultimate price. The voices of the past whispered in her mind, their words filled with caution, with regret. They had not understood the full extent of the power they were tampering with, and in their arrogance, they had unleashed something that could not be controlled. The vision faded, leaving Mara standing alone in the darkened chamber, the hum of the artifact still echoing in her ears. We were wrong, the echo's voice whispered, filled with sorrow. And now, you must carry the weight of our mistake. The echoes of the past still reverberated in Mara's mind as she stood in the chamber, the vision of the lost civilization fading from her consciousness. The hum of the artifact continued to pulse through the room, filling the space with a strange energy that seemed to permeate every part of her being. She could feel it in her bones, this weight, this undeniable force pulling her deeper into the mystery. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her heart racing as her thoughts scrambled to process everything she had just witnessed. The team was still frozen in place, eyes wide, weapons still raised, but no one dared to speak. The silence between them stretched long, the only sound the low, distant hum of the artifact, like a heartbeat in the darkness. Mara's fingers curled into fists at her sides as the weight of the echo's words pressed down on her. We were wrong. And now, you must carry the weight of our mistake. Her mind raced, but she fought to keep control of her emotions. The power of the artifact had stirred something deep within her, something she couldn't explain. But the warning was clear. The echo was right. They weren't ready for this. No one was. Is anyone else hearing this? Lila's voice broke through the silence, shaky with disbelief. She sounded almost scared. No, not just scared, terrified. Mara turned to her, meeting her gaze, and saw the same fear reflected back at her. This is bigger than we thought, Mara said quietly, her voice steady despite the swirling chaos inside her. This isn't just about us anymore. This is about something much older, much more dangerous than we can even begin to understand. Tarek stepped forward, his boots making the only sound in the otherwise still chamber. His eyes were narrowed, his expression hard as he surveyed the room. He looked down at the artifact, still glowing ominously in the center of the room, its hum vibrating through the air like the pulse of some ancient heart. What do we do now? Mara didn't know. She couldn't know. Everything about this place, this artifact, was beyond her comprehension. But one thing was clear, she couldn't let this power fall into the wrong hands. Whatever the echo had warned about, whatever consequence this place held, she had to find a way to stop it from spreading. I don't know, Mara admitted, her voice soft. But I do know we can't leave without figuring this out. There was a long pause before Tarek spoke again, his voice low and serious. What if the power we're dealing with is too dangerous to even understand? What if we can't stop it once we've opened the door? Mara's eyes flicked to the team around her, then back to the artifact. She felt it, this strange, irresistible pull that seemed to come from the depths of the device, beckoning her, calling her to step closer. The answer, she realized, was not to destroy it, but to understand it. We have to know everything, she said, her tone steady now, her resolve hardening. If we leave now, we risk giving someone else the chance to use it, someone who won't care about the consequences. We can't let that happen. Tarek didn't respond right away. Instead, he glanced around at the others, silently gauging their reactions. They had all come this far, but none of them had expected to face something like this. The reality of the situation was dawning on them. Their mission had changed. They weren't just dealing with a relic of the past. They were standing at the threshold of something much greater, something much more dangerous. We don't have the luxury of turning back, Mara continued, her voice firm. We came here to stop something from happening. And if this is the key to it, then we're going to have to face it head on. The room seemed to close in around them, the oppressive silence thickening as the hum of the artifact grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a force that vibrated through the air, through the very ground beneath their feet. It was calling them. We need to get a closer look, Mara said, her gaze never leaving the glowing artifact. There has to be a way to interface with it. There must be a way to understand how it works. Tarek took a step forward, his hand still resting on his weapon. I'm not sure this is the right move, Mara. Whatever this thing is, it's not just a piece of technology. It feels like it's alive. Mara turned to him, meeting his eyes with a steady gaze. That's exactly why we need to understand it. If it's alive, it has a purpose. And if it has a purpose, then it's not just sitting here for no reason. There was another long pause as the team processed her words. Finally, Tarek nodded, though his face remained grim. All right, but we do this carefully. No one gets too close until we know what we're dealing with. Mara nodded in agreement, and with that, the team began to move forward once more, cautiously approaching the center of the room where the artifact lay. As they neared the platform, the hum intensified, resonating in their bones, as if the very air itself was charged with energy. Mara could feel it now. This was no ordinary device. It was a vessel, a conduit of power, something far beyond their understanding. Lila moved closer to the artifact, her eyes wide with a mix of wonder and fear. What do you think it's doing? Why is it pulsing like this? I don't know, Mara said, stepping forward. But it's connected to the echo. And whatever it is, it's been here for a long time. We need to figure out what it's trying to tell us. The air grew colder still, the temperature dropping with every second as they circled the artifact. As Mara reached out to touch the device, the ground beneath their feet suddenly trembled, a low, rumbling vibration that reverberated through the chamber. Get back, Tarek shouted, reaching out to pull Mara away from the artifact. But it was too late. The moment Mara's fingers brushed against the surface of the artifact, the entire room seemed to come alive. The hum of the device became a roar, a violent surge of energy that flared to life, lighting up the chamber in a blinding flash. The ground shook beneath them, and a strange, unnatural force tugged at their bodies, pulling them toward the center of the room. The team staggered, their footing unstable as the room seemed to warp and twist around them. Mara's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to pull away, but the force of the artifact's power was too great. It felt as though the very walls of the room were closing in, the air growing thick and oppressive, making it hard to breathe. Get away from it, Lila screamed, her voice nearly drowned out by the cacophony of sound that filled the room. But Mara couldn't pull away. Her hand was still pressed against the artifact, and she could feel it now, the power coursing through her, filling her mind, her very soul with an overwhelming surge of energy. It was as if the artifact was alive, as if it was communicating with her on some primal level, its ancient wisdom flooding into her mind. Stop, Tarek shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos. Mara pulled back, but it was too late. The power of the artifact surged through her, and Mara felt herself falling, her body losing all sense of gravity, as if she were being drawn into the very heart of the storm. The last thing she saw before everything went dark was the flickering image of the echo, its voice no longer a distant whisper, but a booming, resonant command that shook her to her core. "You were never meant to wield this power," the echo said, its tone colder than ever. "But now, it is too late." Then, darkness took over, and Mara was lost in the void. Mara's mind swirled in the void, a tempest of confusion and overwhelming energy. It felt as though she was trapped in a state between consciousness and oblivion, her senses disjointed, disconnected from her body. The darkness around her seemed infinite, stretching out in every direction, and yet, in that deep, unyielding blackness, there was a faint flicker of light. No, not light, but something more, a presence, an awareness, something ancient, vast, and powerful. The artifact's power still surged through her veins, each pulse like a beating heart in the depths of her soul. Her breath caught in her throat, and a low, guttural sound escaped her lips, half a gasp, half a cry. But the sound did not belong to her alone. It echoed, rippling through the vastness of the void, and was answered by another voice, one that was both familiar and strange at the same time. "Mara, you are awakening." The voice rang through the emptiness, its resonance strong and unsettling. Mara tried to focus on it, but the more she attempted to grasp it, the more it seemed to slip through her fingers. She struggled, but the weight of the power pulling at her was suffocating, dragging her deeper into this realm of darkness. "You are not meant to be here," the voice continued, its tone cold and distant. Yet there was an undercurrent of something else, something like sorrow, or perhaps regret. "But you have crossed the threshold. Now, there is no turning back." The words seemed to hit her like a physical blow, her mind reeling in the wake of their meaning. Threshold. The word resonated with a deep and ancient understanding, one she couldn't fully grasp. What threshold had she crossed? What did this presence mean by that? Suddenly, the darkness around her fractured. A crack appeared in the void, and light poured through it, bright, almost blinding. But the light was not warm. It was harsh, cold, sterile. The light revealed a strange, fractured landscape, an image of a vast, broken world that seemed to stretch endlessly before her. Broken ruins littered the ground, scattered like the remnants of a forgotten civilization, and in the distance, towering structures stood tall, but their surfaces were cracked, crumbling, as if time itself had ravaged them. "Do you see it?" the voice asked. "This was once our domain. We were the creators of all you see here. We sought to rule, to bend the cosmos to our will." Mara's heart thundered in her chest as her eyes roamed over the broken expanse. But there was something more, something lurking just beyond the edge of her perception. A cold, creeping sensation crawled up her spine. There was a darkness here, not just in the landscape, but in the very essence of this place, a malevolent force, ancient and all-consuming. "We failed," the voice continued, its tone now tinged with an unsettling melancholy. "We reached too far. We sought power beyond comprehension, and in doing so, we brought our own end." The ground beneath Mara's feet began to tremble. She tried to move, but her body felt paralyzed, like it was being pulled in every direction by unseen forces. The landscape before her began to warp, the edges of the shattered world stretching and distorting as though the very fabric of reality was unraveling. "It is not just power that you wield, Mara," the voice whispered. "It is corruption. Corruption that has been festering in the heart of our creation, waiting for someone to awaken it. Someone like you." Mara gasped, her mind reeling. The realization struck her like a bolt of lightning. The artifact, the power she had felt surging through her, it wasn't just a tool. It was a vessel, a containment, a prison. She had unleashed something that had been held at bay for millennia, and now it was free. "You are the key," the voice intoned, its tone heavy with finality. "You were always meant to awaken the power, to shatter the threshold, to release the darkness that has been bound for so long. And now it will be free." The ground shook violently as Mara's vision blurred, the crumbling world before her collapsing into a whirlwind of chaos. The sky, once filled with stars, was now blackened with swirling clouds of storm and fire. The once glorious civilization had been consumed by its own ambition, and now the corruption had taken root in Mara herself. She screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the chaos, lost in the maelstrom of power and destruction. Her body was no longer her own, the energy of the artifact coursing through her like a living thing, twisting and turning inside her, reshaping her very essence. She was being torn apart, but she could not escape. "It's too late," the voice said, its tone cold and distant. "You cannot stop it now. The power is in you. You will become the vessel for all that was unleashed." And then, just as quickly as it had all begun, the storm ceased. The ground stilled, the winds died, and the image of the shattered world faded into nothingness. Mara was left standing in the dark void once more, her body trembling, her mind struggling to grasp the enormity of what had just transpired. She was no longer alone in her consciousness. The power, the corruption, it had fused with her, becoming a part of her. She gasped, her chest heaving as she tried to regain control of her breath. The weight of the power was suffocating, pressing in on her from all sides. Her thoughts felt fragmented, her vision clouded. And yet, she could feel something else now, something deep within her, pushing against her own will, urging her to embrace it. But she fought back. She had to. She couldn't let herself be consumed by this darkness. "I won't let you control me," Mara whispered, her voice shaking but determined. "I won't be your vessel." For a moment, there was silence, and then the voice spoke again, its tone different this time, darker, angrier. "You think you have a choice?" The ground beneath her feet began to tremble once more, the air thick with malevolent energy. The presence was closing in on her, pressing in from all sides, wrapping around her like a shroud. "You are mine now," the voice growled, "and there is no escape. The power that courses through you, it is not yours to control. It will consume you, just as it consumed us." Mara's vision blurred, her consciousness flickering between moments of clarity and darkness. The storm of energy around her grew stronger, suffocating her, until she could no longer tell where her own thoughts ended and the presence began. But even in the face of this overwhelming force, Mara refused to succumb. She had come this far, she had crossed this threshold, and she wouldn't let herself fall into the same trap that had claimed the civilization before her. She would not be another tool of corruption, another casualty in the cycle of ambition and destruction. With every ounce of strength she had left, Mara pushed back against the darkness, her mind screaming in defiance. "No," she shouted, her voice louder than it had ever been. "I won't let you take me." And then, as if responding to her defiance, the storm of energy around her shattered. The presence recoiled, the overwhelming power breaking apart in an explosion of light and sound. Mara felt her body lurch, her mind swimming as the energy erupted outward, scattering like dust in the wind. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the storm was gone. Mara opened her eyes, gasping for air, her chest heaving as she struggled to catch her breath. She was back in the chamber, surrounded by her team, the artifact still humming softly in the center of the room. But the power was different now, fainter, quieter. For a moment, the world around her seemed still, as if holding its breath. The team stood frozen, eyes wide with shock and concern. Tarek stepped forward, his hand outstretched as though to steady her. "Mara," his voice was cautious, unsure. She looked up at him, her body trembling, but her mind clearer than it had been in what felt like ages. The darkness was gone. The storm was over. But she knew the truth now. Whatever had been unleashed, whatever had been released into her, it wasn't finished yet. The threshold had been shattered, and there was no going back. "We've only just begun," she whispered, her voice filled with a new resolve. "The real fight is just starting." The room was silent for a long moment, the gravity of Mara's words settling over them like a heavy fog. They had crossed a line, and whatever came next, they would face it together.